Greetings, YouTube. My wife and I had an opportunity to watch Snowpiercer recently. I picked it up at a flea market for $1. Apparently someone didn't like it. And I came into it knowing a good deal about the film. And I was really hoping that it was going to hit the same vibe as Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Because from the premise given to me, from things I'd picked up on the internet, that really seemed to be the place that this film would blossom if that was the kind of zone they were going for. In fact, the main antagonist in the film, Gilliam, is named after Terry Gilliam, the director of Brazil. So my hopes were not completely unfounded. Unfortunately, they were. This film has nothing to do with that kind of vibe. And because of that, ultimately, this film fails for me. The premise of the film is that humanity rides a train. It's a train that travels around the planet. It takes 1 year to make one circuit of this giant track they travel on. Because the rest of the planet has been frozen solid because they released a gas in an attempt to slow global warming, which froze the Earth. So, from that premise, I was really hoping he was going to go for something absurd like Brazil. Because if you present it in a realistic manner, you've already lost me. Boom, I'm gone. Now I am just an observer of something that I know is going to make absolutely no sense. Because this film really wanted to be a big budget art house film. This is a metaphor. From the first scene to the last, this whole film is a metaphor. And as a metaphor, you need the absurdity of Gilliam's Brazil. Because if you try to base this in reality, you try to set this foundation firmly in our world, then you have to have it be firmly in our world. But when you present me something as absurd as we froze the planet with some kind of magic gas, and then there's a railroad track that goes all the way around the planet, it takes a year to go on, and a nuclear-powered train runs on it, yes, you've lost me. Now, it looks grim and gritty, and it feels like the way it should in some sort of dystopian prison camp. And when I first saw that, I'm like, oh wow, this has got a really good texture to it. You know, they really did that well. And I kept waiting for the payoff, waiting for the absurd elements that would make me buy in to the fact that, yes, we can have this really gritty, realistic aspect to it, but we need this other part that's not going to be as serious for this absurd premise to function. And I never got it. It was just grim and gritty from beginning to end. And I was supposed to believe it. And I couldn't. They didn't go believable enough for me to buy into it, and they didn't go absurd enough for me to think that it worked. So why didn't I believe it? Well, it's the same scale train as we've always had in our world. On tracks just like our world. So, even if I buy into a nuclear-powered train, and okay, I can buy into a nuclear-powered train. You know, electricity is electricity. If you want me to, I'll buy that part. But for a train to be self-sufficient, completely, utterly sealed in every way, shape, and form, a mobile biosphere, it's going to have to be huge. It's going to have to be a ground-based spaceship. And the premise is that the mad genius behind this train built it before the freeze. Now, how the heck are you going to build a train track that goes all the way around the planet? You can't. It's not possible. So, like I said, it's absurd. Now, you could have, say, for example, built this whole thing in an underground bunker. Fallout 4, or all the end of the Fallout series. And you build it in a bunker tapping into geothermal heat. Never have to worry about heat and energy. You've got it. And now I could buy into that. You do that, and all the other things I'd be willing to ignore because you presented me with a believable structure. And this film doesn't. I was disappointed with it. Chris Evans did a good job. There was some nice acting in there. But there were things in it that just didn't make any sense to me. The whole biosphere aspect, it just isn't going to work. They use axes, which are great terror weapons, but when you're fighting in close quarters, you want piercing, thrusting weapons. You want gladiuses. You don't want axes. There seemed to be a large portion of people willing to kill. Where'd they come from? But you're telling me that the class structure is so large there's no bleed over from one to the other? I couldn't do it. It wasn't bad. It just failed. Now, one of the reasons it fails is that their main B&E guy, they get a guy out of their prison, which are drawers, essentially morgue drawers of their prisons. I don't want to imagine what they smelled like. And his job is to get them through all the gates as they make this revolution moving up through the train. Again, this is all about classism. It's all about global warming. And his goal, when they get to the final, is a gate goes into the engine and there's a gate that goes outside. He wants to go outside. Awesome. And the first window they encounter, which is the first car they get into after the prison cars that they were held in, the end cars, where they were basically the death camp cars that they were in, there was a window right there. There you go, boy. Go for it, dude. You're out of here. Even though no one on that train had any skill to survive in a frozen wasteland. They do tell you that the wasteland is getting warmer, and at the end of the film there's a polar bear, which tells you there's a functioning biosphere. But it's a functioning biosphere that you could not survive in unless you have very specific skills. No one on that train had them. And in achieving his goal of blowing the gate that went outside, he derails the entire train. And at the end, you see two people standing in the snow looking at a polar bear. Awesome. You just destroyed humanity. Again, metaphor. There's also the metaphor that governments and experts, the scientists that come up with this magic gas, cannot be trusted, but industrialists, they can be trusted. I'm like, who wrote this story? John Galt? I was surprised I didn't see reared in steel written on the side of the train. So there's a lot going on here. And it could have been great. It's still visually interesting. Again, some of the characters are good. Chris Evans plays a character with a lot of depth, and it's nice to see him, because I'd only ever seen him really in Captain America, so it was nice to see he could do more than that. Tilda Swinton was awesome in this. Ed Harris was good in this. It's just they were told to act in a believable world that wasn't believable. They were told to act like this was reality, and it couldn't be. If you're going to build a film on nothing but metaphor, and you have to firmly base it in reality, and this train isn't real, or go far enough into the absurd, Gilliam's Brazil, then I can ignore all the bumps. And the director and the writers didn't do that. So I was just like, it just didn't capture my interest. You broke me out of the film too early. You had the chance of doing it. You had a chance to pull me in and keep me there. And you didn't. And ultimately, I see that as a failure of the film, not me. The fact that I didn't enjoy this film a whole lot isn't because there's some fault in my ability to be critical about a film. It's that it didn't do what it was supposed to do. And I like the Tremors movies. So I'm willing to give films leeway, folks. And this film isn't. Didn't give me the room I needed to believe it. I want to work with a film. Heard a great actor once say that when you're going into a call, looking to get a role, he says those people have a problem. They need an actor to fill a role. You are their answer. Go into that interview, that audition, with that attitude of mind. You are their answer. I'm willing to walk into a theater and I'm willing to buy into what a director shows me, but they have to be successful at it. They have to get within my radar range, and this film doesn't. So, pretty. some good acting by specific actors. John Hurt was excellent, perfect casting in his regard. But it wasn't absurd enough, or it wasn't realistic enough. One of the two. They had to go into one of those two directions, and they didn't. They tried to dance in the middle, and ultimately, it failed.